We just have not been able to find anything for under $1,000 per zone.
The Plymouth Township Planning Commission meeting will come to order at 7 o'clock, and if the secretary will please call roll.
Kendra Barberina is here. Kendra Barberina is here. Dennis Sobolski,
Here.
Jim Hart,
Here.
John Itzel,
Here.
Bob Dorshevitz,
Here.
Keith Postel,
Here.
Bill Pratt.
Here.
Okay, and we have the approval of this evening's agenda, and we've gotten communication from applicant 2293-0518 on the Ann Arbor Trail use variance, and they've asked to be removed from the agenda for this evening. For with that removal, is there a motion for the amended agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the agenda as amended.
Mine is.
Test.
Mr. Chairman, I move,
You know,
doesn't sound like it's going out again. Oh, there we go. Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the agenda as amended.
support.
Moved by Commissioner Pratt and supported by Commissioner Barberina to approve the amended agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Approved. A motion, any objection? Okay, motion is approved. And the minutes of the, approval of the minutes of the May 16th meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the minutes as submitted.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Pratt, supported by Commissioner Barberina to approve the minutes of May 16th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So moving on to page 2, public hearing, public comment, application 2286-0518, the Gray's Greenhouse. And Ms. Howell, your report.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. The application before you tonight is for a Class A non-conforming designation approval for Gray's Greenhouse. The subject property is at the northeast corner of the Joy and Lily Road intersection. It's approximately 6.7 acres in total, and it's zoned the R2A, which is the multiple family residential district. The multiple family zoning designation is extremely limiting in its permitted and special land uses, in that it's really just designed to accommodate residential dwellings that are two units or greater. Currently, the property contains a greenhouse, a 1.5 story single-family dwelling unit, a 2-story wooden barn, and a gravel driveway and some surface area for customer parking. So all of the current uses on the site are presently non-conforming in respect to the multiple family zoning district. The zoning ordinance does provide, per Article 27, that certain non-conforming structures and uses may not have a significant negative effect on adjacent properties, and there's a provision that allows for, there's a provision that allows for the continuation of such uses should they be deemed as this Class A non-conforming use, because they're non-detrimental to the immediate area. In contrast, there is the Class B non-conforming use, which are uses that are not ideal to be continued in the township, either not in line with the adjacent property or not in line with the future vision of the master plan. So in the planning review, there's a listing of the various criteria that the zoning ordinance requires to be found as part of a Class A non-conforming designation. And, you know, in general, this specific site has been a important element to the township for a long time, and it is a commercial operation that has the potential to be expanded slightly with uses that are associated with a commercial greenhouse. The use also provides a buffer. Directly to the east is a series of industrial properties. And to the north are additional residential uses. And to the south, of course, there's the airport. So this is a appropriate transition area, especially located at the intersection of Joy and Lilly. Also, with the current zoning of the multifamily district and at over 6.5 acres, there is potential if this property were, sold tomorrow and purchased by a developer for multiple family, that this site could become quite intensive due to the acreage and the allowable number of units. So even in its present configuration or with some sort of slight expansion to the retail operations at the site, it's not anticipated that this use would have any larger impact to the adjacent properties as if it were traditionally developed under the current zoning. Given those recommendations and the fact that the applicant is really seeking this so that they can continue to legally use the property in a conforming manner, we completely recommend the Class A designation. Before you tonight, there are also some photographs. I apologize, we cannot, we're having some technical issues with the computer, so those can't be on the screen, but they have provided some additional photos for your review to best understand the property. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Okay. Is the applicant here? Do you have a presentation or comments to make? If you could step up to the podium and give us your name and, right there, right there.
That's the table.
I don't have a full presentation. I did prepare a narrative piece that I think I submitted with the application.
Sorry, that mic may not pick up if you take the hand. Sometimes that gooseneck mic doesn't pick up well.
How about? All right.
Yeah.
This is working. Okay. So I did prepare a narrative piece that I did submit with the application. If you'd like, I could go through that and just read that so that people can hear, but I don't want to be redundant for you guys either.
Well, we've had an opportunity to read it.
Okay. Okay.
And so, I can throw the floor open for questions that the commission might have before we open up the floor for public comment.
Sure. Well, I'll say just a couple more things that kind of relate to
Okay.
that and giving a little bit more explanation of the issue. I'm currently in the process of buying the business from the Gray family, who has owned it since it was built in 1928. And in going forward to do that, I was looking for the zoning change just to allow a little bit more flexibility with the use of the structures and also the flexibility to kind of alter the footprint of some of the structures in ways that would be compatible with the current business. And what we're finding this year and in the past probably about a year and a half that I've worked at the greenhouse is there are going to be some avenues for growth that are pretty exciting and very much in line with kind of what the greenhouse is and has always been. But that could require, building a garage for the mower or maybe an additional hoop house or, pretty minor changes like that. But that would be pretty essential for growing the business in the ways that we would like to see done. In the past year, we've started to incorporate a lot more workshops and educational opportunities, pop-up sales, things like that at the greenhouse, which has been great and which has made it a lot more of a kind of community resource, I think, even than it's been. But in order to do that, like I said, we may need to alter the use of some spaces, or we may want to use the barn to host those workshops, and that would mean finding some kind of storage area, which would mean altering the footprint. So that's kind of the issue right now. And also, if any structures are damaged or burned down, which would be tragic anyway, we wouldn't be able to rebuild because of the non-conforming. So as I'm kind of, as we're working through this process of changing ownership, the Class A would at least give a little bit more promise that this would be able to stay as it is, and developing it would make some sense long-term. So, yeah,
Any questions from the commission before we open up the public hearing?
no?
Okay, why don't you have a seat, and then we'll open
Okay.
up. So with that, we will open the public hearing up at 7:10. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak to this particular application? Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public hearing at 7:11. Any comments, discussion among the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I seem to remember having a discussion about, I'm sorry. I seem to remember having a discussion about this property and overlays or something like that. Some time ago, nothing ever came of that. Is that what I'm guessing is happening here?
Yes, you're correct. We did have a discussion on an overlay for the future land use map of the master plan. So that discussion went to the Board of Trustees, and then it was decided that no action would be taken on it. Even if the board had taken action on it, though, because it's the future land use map, if something were, the property would still be non-conforming in respect to the zoning ordinance, even with
Okay.
it.
Any other questions?
Well, I see no earthly reason why we wouldn't grant this, especially in light of the fact that it's good for the neighborhood and the area, and granting the designation would certainly eliminate the possibility of having a problem with wind damage or something and they couldn't rebuild. So, I mean, I can't see any possible reason not to approve this.
Any other comments? Okay, is there a motion?
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman,
You go ahead.
I move that we approve the application 2286-0518 to grant Class A non-conforming status to parcel R780629900016 000 for the following reasons. Continuance of the non-conforming structure or use would not create a danger to public health, safety, or welfare in the neighborhood or the community as a whole. Continuance of the non-conforming structure or use does not and is not likely to significantly depress the value of nearby properties. Continuance of the non-conforming structure of use does not and is not likely to create general nuisance for nearby properties. No useful purpose would be served by strict application of the provisions of the ordinance of this ordinance with the use of structure that does not conform. The structure is useful. The structure or use is lawful at the time of inception and is non-conforming as defined by this ordinance. The change from one non-conforming use to another non-conforming use shall result in the change in the use, which will have less of a negative impact on neighboring properties than the existing non-conforming use of land, and would therefore bring the use and development of the property into the greater conformity and within the spirit and intent of the ordinance, and the proposed alteration, extension, expansion, or replacement will not have a negative impact on neighboring properties and will bring the use into greater conformity with the spirit, intent, and intent of the ordinance.
Is there support?
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Pratt, supported by Commissioner Pastel, to grant the Class A non-conforming designation approval for said application. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, application 2292-0518, the picnic basket rezoning. Ms. Howell, your report.
Thank you, Commissioners. the application before you is for a rezoning request to the Picnic Basket Market, which is located at 49471 Ann Arbor Road. It is currently zoned the C1 Neighborhood Shopping District. And as you can see on your cover sheet for this packet, this is an older aerial. It's the latest that our GIS shows. But these 3 parcels in red have been combined and now consists of the most recent Picnic Basket expansion. As far as the rezoning request, just like to keep in mind that rezoning requests are a 2-part process. The first is consideration by the Planning Commission. The second is that recommendation by the Planning Commission to the Board of Trustees for their ultimate approval or denial. Either way, a recommendation in the end is made to the Board of Trustees. So the applicant's request from the C1 to the C2, which is the next most intensive commercial district, is really to provide additional flexibility in the different uses that could be applied to the existing Picnic Basket Market, specifically for the use of serving alcohol. On page 2 of the review letter, there is a summary table that highlights both the permitted and the special land uses in the C1 district, but also then the C2 district. And you can see that the C2 district encompasses all of the uses in the top table in the C1 district, and then also additional uses. So in theory, when a property is rezoned, then we as a community are applying consensus that should this property in 10 years or 50 years or 100 years be redeveloped or the use change, that we are comfortable with the range of uses in the C2 district in this case. I would like the commission to please note that the special land uses in the C2, some of them are quite intensive as compared to what is there today. So for instance, there are hotels are considered a special land use, outdoor storage areas, churches. These special uses, though, do require public hearing and consideration by the Planning Commission. It's not a guarantee that these uses would be allowable under the C2 because they would still need to meet the standards and appropriateness of the site. When you're looking at the left-hand column for the C2 table, those are the uses that by right, if the site can accommodate the parking and the setbacks for those uses, legally then those would need to be permitted in the future moving forward. So there are some protections with those special land uses, but a rezoning to the C2 does allow this mix of uses, a wider mix of uses.
So this is one parcel now, right?
Correct. The parcels have been combined and are just under the tax ID number that's referenced in the beginning of this report.
And is it, so is it accurate that it was C2 at one time and then it was rezoned to C1?
There was a portion of the site that was C2 and rezoned to C1 so that they would, all the parcels that were to be developed under the Picnic Basket Market would be similar zoning, same zoning. As far as the dimensional standards, there really are not too many differences between the C1 and the C2 district. All of the setbacks remain the same. The only change is with the maximum height allowance. In the C1, it's 20 feet, and in the C2, it's 35. So there's a 15-foot height difference between the two districts. In terms of the surrounding zoning and land uses, this is one of the only commercial site in this area of the township. And, it is surrounded by larger lot, single-family residential. These areas are master planned as well for single-family residential. I think it's important to note, though, that the future land use map designates the site as commercial, and the master plan doesn't differentiate between small-scale local neighborhood serving commercial and larger scale commercial. It's just one designation. So there's not that much guidance for how this site would be developed. I think it's important to consider the fact that the site is 3 acres, which is a sizable parcel if it were to be redeveloped, but it also allows for buffering from the adjacent residential. And then as far as the circulation, both of the roads that this property abut, Ann Arbor and Ridge, they are considered major thoroughfares in the master plan and have future right-of-way widths of 120, the maximum, to accommodate traffic volumes in the future. We received several walk-in inquiries at the Township Planning Department about this site, basically just individuals who were looking to find out more about the rezoning and really what that means. There was also an email inquiry just requesting more information, and they were directed to the different articles and uses that govern the two commercial districts. But nothing formally in writing that we have received either in favor or not for this rezoning. Also before you this evening are a series of photographs. There's 3 photographs. These are the property to the west, adjacent to the west. It's approximately 4 acres, just to show that while it's undeveloped right now, it does look like there's future potential for the site to be redeveloped as residential. There is a creek running through it, which will likely impact the true buildable nature of it and wetlands on the site as well, but it's important to keep in mind the surrounding area.
So this is immediately to the west? Huh.
You're done.
Yeah, so thank you. The recommendation this evening is to go and proceed with the public hearing and hear any comments from the community, and to consider the history of this site and what the future land use map of the master plan, what is appropriate for this site, given that it is designated as commercial and that either could be limited to or neighborhood serving or a wider range of commercial uses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Bob, just when the other 2 parcels were purchased, and joined in one, there was a rezoning request at that time to C2. But then the commission decided to go with the C1 because the less intensive, it was neighborhood commercial. There's only this site and I think one on the far east side along Ann Arbor Trail where that auto repair business is. That's the other C1 that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Yeah. And the applicant is here?
Hello, my name is Al Jonah.
So do you have a presentation or
Well,
comments on?
yeah, so, like we said, it used to be Zone C2, and they asked if we could rezone it to C1. The only concern at the time was the height restriction, and I didn't know that it was going to affect leases, certain uses for like, rental, so, and also now, I'm requesting to be able to serve alcohol. So that is the only reason really why I want this Zone C2. There's the building's at maximum. There's no way I'm going to add any more square footage. There's no redevelopment now in my lifetime. So like I said, all I want to do is be able to lease out the vacant picnic basket. Like right now, I can't even lease out to a tropical smoothie that is interested because it requires seating. I did not know this at the time. So this is why I'm requesting to be zoned to C2.
Okay. Well, we'll open it up for a public hearing, and we'll open up the public hearing at 7:26. So if you can just have a seat, and then we'll have people come up. If there's anyone here that wishes to speak.
Quick question.
Yes.
So under C1, they can't have a sit-down restaurant then? Is that the issue?
As far as the restaurant goes, it depends. A special land use process would grant a sit-down restaurant, but if it's going to be like carry-out, like a Chinese takeaway, then we're looking at the C2.
So just make sure I'm clear. So the issue is that, so he could have a sit-down restaurant, it's a special use, but to serve alcohol, that cannot be under a special use.
Yes, as far as the ordinance is worded, alcohol is prohibited in the C1, so his only option would be C2.
That answer your question.
But under C2, you could have a bar then, right?
Correct.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing at,
Thank you.
yeah, 7:27. Is there anyone here? Yes, if you step forward to the podium. Yes, you right here with your hand up. Come on up to the podium, give us your name and address, and you're limited to about 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Pam Mincher, Pamela Mincher. Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Well, why is this one here then?
It's a decoy.
Pamela Mincher, 8869 Ridge Road, Plymouth Township. I've been a resident of Plymouth Township for over 45 years. I would just like to give you a little background history about this parcel. First of all, the map that my husband downloaded from your website is not the way it looks now. This is the way it looked many years ago when a store owner named Stan Giroux had the little store at the corner, and it was zoned C2, and he wanted to expand further down Ridge Road where Al is now. But he came to all the neighbors and told us that he wanted to tear down the old store and build a new one, and we supported him because the old store was in a bad place at the corner of Ridge and Ann Arbor Road, and so we supported him. Well, then after that, the property was sold, and it became what it is now. But it was because of the people in the neighborhood, well, not solely because, obviously you had something to say about it, but we supported that just because the building that was there was very old and was in a very close spot to the street. So that was supported. Well then the present owner bought up 2 residential properties on Ridge Road. He rented them for many years. They were not kept in good condition. I'm sorry, I would not consider you a good neighbor, Al, because those properties were not kept up, and we knew the people that had lived there previously. I object to this rezoning because this is not a commercial area. The southwest section of Plymouth Township is very special to those of us who have lived there. And I, who have lived there for 45 years, am not by far the oldest resident there. There are many that have lived there much longer than we have. But we moved there because it was rural. We moved there because of the trees. We fought for the trees numerous times. We've worked with a planner when they built Ridgewood West, when the township had a planner, and we were able to work with and not have all the trees removed. And it's been kind of a constant struggle. And now in my old age, here I am up here again, asking you to please not approve this. This is not a commercial district. Right now, Al can sell all kinds of liquor and wine from his party store. He's got picnic tables out in front. If people want a wine bar, they can go out, and they do. They go out and sit and have their lunch there. They don't need a commercial establishment. And it worries me because this is a neighborhood. It's a residential neighborhood. It's 1 acre minimum lots. And I guess that's all I have to say, except I'd like to present, this was a letter I wrote to Shannon Price several years ago when there was some other issues in the neighborhood, and I'm not going to take the time to read it now, but am I permitted to give you a copy of this?
Yeah, yes, you are. Give it to Ms. Howe, and thank you for coming out. Is there anyone else?
Do you live south of the store? I do. Okay, that's all we need.
Are you an adjoining neighbor, or you just live in that area south of the?
We consider ourselves the triangle
Okay.
of Ridge,
Yeah.
Joy, and Ann Arbor Road.
Okay,
We are the triangle
Okay.
because on the other side of Joy is Camp Township.
right.
So I'm south of the store, but I'm a neighbor.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes, ma'am, if you could step up.
Hi, I'm Corey Behringer. Right now I live in Beacon Meadows. I sold my house and I am presently buying a house on Ridge Road, 8925. My husband was the one that emailed you. He is also one of them that came in. We're very concerned about the commercial building. We did not know this when we bought the house. We like to stay private. We love the trees. That's one of the reasons why we're moving on Ridge Road. The other thing is that I believe in change, and I believe in, moving forward. You have downtown Plymouth, which is gorgeous, and people can go down there and have a drink. I totally agree with this lady, Pamela. There has to be some beauty left in Plymouth. The picnic basket was very small. We've lived in Michigan for 8 years. The picnic basket was very small, and it's moved to something really nice. Give him a variance if he wants to sublet his building next door. And have him go about that through the people in the community. Have them agree upon it, because that's who live there.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Sir, come on up.
Yes, my name is Joe Sheblin. I'm here with my wife Eleanor, and we do live in Ridgewood West and have lived there for a number of years, but see Alice differently, I think, than the previous two speakers. In this regard, the old building that was there was dilapidated. It was an eyesore. The old gas pump out front that I'm sure some of you, or maybe all of you, recall. Al came in, and he has improved everything there tremendously. The store that's there, the picnic basket, the CVS properties, and what he wants to do, with future plans, my wife, and many of the neighbors that I've talked to have no objection whatsoever to that. I mean, we've been over to Al's 4th of July for hot dogs and so on and so forth. That's have many neighbors. He has no plans. I've talked to him about expanding into something different that would be a problem for the neighborhood. So we support Al and what he's done. And I guess if we had anything negative to say, it would be about development of the properties north on Ridge and Ann Arbor Road. That's been proposed in the past, and it was rejected. But we certainly would fight something like a C2 license or rezoning over there, tooth and nail. But with Al and the things that he's doing and has done and what he wants to bring into the store there, we don't see a problem. And I have not really, before this evening, heard of a problem. So I support it, my wife supports it, and if I can speak for some of the neighbors that I've talked to, they support it. So good luck, Al.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Leo Gonzalez.
The other mic.
Oh, the other one.
Yeah.
That one's a decoy.
Yeah, I didn't hear that the first time. I'm Leo Gonzalez. Thank you. I've been a neighbor of 10741 Fellows Hill Drive. We moved our family there 20 years now, and we've been a customer, Picnic Basket, ever since. As you consider this request this evening, I ask you to consider the investment that Al has made into this store and this development and the amenity, the really convenient amenity that many of us utilize, his store, CVS, and the new grocery store, and of course the old grocery store, and what it's been as a convenience for our neighborhood, all of our neighborhoods. And I would consider you to look at the track record. Look at what he's done every time. He's taken a building that was dilapidated. He invested into that building for a new upgraded facility, then went from that to a larger upgraded facility. And every time he's done it in first-class manner. Al has a substantial investment here. Whatever he puts into this center, he's going to want it only to complement his businesses and to be an amenity for the neighborhood. So I look at what he's done thus far, and everything's been successful. Many of us utilize this shopping center, and I'm sure whatever uses that might come after, based upon this rezoning, would only be another benefit to the shopping center as well as an amenity to the community.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, we will close the public hearing at 7:39. And just to respond to the two people that were concerned about the trees and development, there's not going to be any additional construction. The building that's there is there for the time being. I don't know how long that's going to be there. It could be there for 10 years. It could be there for 100 years. So there isn't any danger of the trees that would be removed, because basically right now what you see is what you get. But we are here really to discuss the appropriate use of this particular property. So that's where our focus of discussion will be. So questions from the commission?
I had a question for Laura. How high is the building right now? How tall is it?
I don't recall. Perhaps Aljona can inform us. I'm sorry, I wasn't part of the process for that.
How tall is the building right now?
Oh, 20, 30?
Because wasn't there a variance or something for the height?
It's more than the current amount, because when you were putting in your expansion, that was a big issue about allowing a little bit of extra height, and not so much for the building itself, but the facade. and we took into consideration that it was near the road, needed to be seen, and the land elevation right there was lower, so that the impact on the road from that particular part wasn't as great. But I personally object to getting anything with 35 feet or raising the height of these structures by changing the zoning. That was a major issue when you had your expansion.
So it's more than 20 now, or it's less than 30?
There, I don't know the exact amount, but we did make a concession on that because the ground was so low that had the ground been higher, it would have really stuck out a lot. And there's nothing else that high around that.
So kind of my thoughts on it, or a few comments I would make, is that I live in the area. I've been, like Leo, been a customer for 20 years. It's a great asset to have it close by. You know, Al's a stand-up guy. He's good to his word. How do we? I think the concern is the what if. What if 10 years down the road he sells it and somebody under this new existing. So it's the what if, what could potentially. Yeah. What about the fact it was C2? So when you bought it, it was C2?
Correct.
And then
A portion of it was C2.
A portion of it?
Pardon?
Was it just a portion of it? Because you added.
No, it was all C2.
No.
Sorry?
I think, Al, what happened was, when you had the original, where it was originally a gas station.
Yes.
That parcel, I believe, was a C2, goes back to the early 50s. Then you purchased those two residential parcels while they were zoned residential. So then when you wanted to join all of that together for an expansion for your original new store, not the expansion you did, but when you tore down the old gas station and built what you did, there was a discussion here about, you had come in wanting it all C2. And the commission decided at that time, the recommendation to the trustees, that it would be a C1. So it would be a neighborhood type of commercial. They didn't want to see any expansion there. A little bit of a history lesson is that the two Ridgewood Hill subdivisions, the original Ridgewood Hills and the south one, those are under consent judgment, because when those were developed, those developers wanted to put commercial along the roadways there. And it was before my time, but I have heard and have been told that that was a way for the township to limit the commercial. They did not want commercial really beyond the west side of Sheldon Road. So the people that all live in that area, sort of pay a price. They had smaller lot sizes, so there wouldn't be commercial further, encroaching. So the commission at that time, wanted to keep it sort of low-key, recognizing, Al, I mean, I'm a customer too, great investment, but we're looking, we have to discuss intelligently and objectively, what we're exposing ourselves to if we want to do the C1 or C2.
So is your goal to take the vacant spot that you used to occupy and utilize that for?
No, my goal for that was to get a tenant such as a Tropical Smoothie, which I can't lease to now, and that's it. Nothing is going to change as far as the structure of the building. You could say what if, but the two people here that are worried, even if I sold it tomorrow, the footprint is built at the max. You can't even add 1 square foot to that building. You cannot make any change. So if someone was going to knock it down and rebuild it, that'd be like spending $1,000 to make $100. It does not, that does not make sense. The building is not going to change. A tree is not going to come down. All I want is to bring the community even closer together. So if I decide to serve alcohol like everybody else is doing now, it's to bring the community together. So that's all my wishes are. I've been there, I got a great track record, I've been there 30 years, so there's nothing going to change. There's nothing going to change. They were worried about, when they rezoned me, they were worried about me building 2 stories. I did not build it, nor would it ever make sense to build it.
Okay, so you're saying that you want to get a liquor license, or beer and wine, liquor license, right, specifically?
So even that, I want to do at a small scale. So now everybody's doing craft beers, craft wines. Somebody local wants to sell their wine, I could serve it. I don't, like right now, I have to give them a sample cup. But, if I do like a 3-bottle wine tasting in my store, I'm allowed to. It's, that's all.
So where would you do this?
In the cafe. I would move some
cafe.
things around, yeah.
Let me just throw another wrinkle in here, Laura. So we're discussing about the C1 versus C2. Your ultimate object here is to sell liquor, correct?
I sell liquor now, but I want to serve.
Yeah, but you want
yeah,
to serve
yeah.
the liquor. So what are your thoughts about if we had suggested to the Board of Trustees that there be a text amendment that in the C1 zoning, that there could be alcoholic beverages served?
So a text amendment to the C1 commercial district would potentially, if initiated by the township, permit the marketplace, or excuse me, Picnic Basket, to serve alcohol. Right now, how it's currently worded, it would be a special land use in the C1 though. So I would advise that if the commission is interested in going down that route, that we think critically about whether or not permitted uses in the C1 could be restaurants with alcohol or not.
So that would be a text amendment to the ordinance. Was that a one-time, or that's an
It's
amendment to
a
the
permanent
ordinance?
change.
Permanent change.
Yeah, permanent change.
So, we're trying to find a solution that meets both needs. And so his objectives are to be able to lease that space for a restaurant, as you articulated, and be able to serve samples, or how does?
What was the question?
No, leasing the space has nothing to do with the liquor license.
No, yeah,
No,
that's 2
he has
separate
two-
reasons.
He has 2 objectives, because you can't lease the space to
A sit-down.
a sit-down.
Anything that has seating, yeah.
Yeah, so he's trying to solve that problem. And then his second goal is to be able to serve at the store, in the store.
I was told the only way any of these issues can get solved was to rezone. I wasn't planning on rezoning. I didn't want to spend the money to come and rezone. So I did it, and, these are the issues I need help with, and that's it.
So how could we, maybe to your suggestion, how could we solve that and still,
Well, here's my own thinking on it. So, the C2 opens up the township to, greater intense use potentially on that site. And the township has a long history of not wanting to do that in that area. So trying to kind of protect the township and their long-term planning with that, we do, but recognizing, Al provides a good service and all of that kind of stuff, that, and trying to support his business, and really that's where people are going more with the craft beers and the wines and all of that stuff, that we would modify basically a text amendment. We wouldn't do it, come from the trustees, but we would recommend that they have sit-down restaurant and alcohol in the C1 district, and that eliminates any of these more intensive uses in the future.
like an auto dealership.
Right.
How would that impact, would there be any impact in terms of parking requirements? Is there an issue there. I mean, I don't know where you are in terms of, I wasn't here when you did your expansion, so are you above the parking requirements right now? Are you right at the parking requirements for the zoning right now? Where are you with parking?
Parking is at where I want to be. It's at,
Not asking where you want to be. I'm asking per the zoning, do you have excess parking or are you right at the max in parking? Because the use that you're talking about is going to generate, I would think would generate more traffic, which is going to increase the need for parking. So a restaurant would have a different parking requirement than an office building would have, a grocery store would have. So,
Yeah,
I mean, that's my question.
I would pick my tenant, carefully. I wouldn't want a tenant that was going to take a lot of parking. So easy in and out would be better than sit down, yeah.
Laura, do you know what his parking is currently?
No, I do not. I wasn't here either when that site plan was reviewed and approved. That is something that we would have to take a look at in the future. The other thing to keep in mind is that depending on his uses, there may be overlap in the peak hours of demand. So, it may or may not be an issue, but it's hard to speculate. I would like to point out that in the ARC zoning district, the Ann Arbor Road Corridor District, which does feature parcels that are much smaller than the subject parcel for the picnic basket and, is adjacent to residential in some cases with smaller setbacks. Alcohol and the serving of alcohol is a permitted use in that district. It's not even a special land use. And there are no additional hoops or processes for current owners to go through for that. I realize that that is a commercial corridor, but it also has similar adjacencies to residential districts and smaller lots. There was an individual who has a restaurant on the corridor that recently came in and wanted to double check in good faith to make sure that they could serve alcohol, and it's completely allowable under our current zoning. So seeing the relation of that district to the C1, it's not clear why that was originally left out.
So here's my thinking in all deference to you, Al. I don't see going to C2. I think the chairman's solution is an artful one because it satisfies your problem. It satisfies your problem and yet doesn't open up the township to all these other uses that what we're trying to do here is a 100-year decision potentially. If you move to a C2 in this spot, I think I would simply not be in favor of it. So from my perspective, if we can work out, I would prefer a special land use, because remember that if you take that special land use to C1, then it's all the C1s, right? So now you've got that Ann Arbor Trail property over on the east side that you have to concern yourself with as well. And I would rather see us have control as to what people are trying to do in that by having a special land use. I would like to see that in that section, so that a sit-down restaurant serving alcohol as a special land use in C1 makes some sense to me. And I don't really know why. I can't think of a good reason right off the top of my head why that would have been a restriction in C1. It might have been just a matter of leaving it out unintentionally. I don't know that, but I think this is again my personal opinion. From your analogy to the ARC district is a real stretch, because the ARC district is a commercial district, and yes, it abuts houses on the back of it, but that's all it does. And so I don't see that as a good comparison. And so I guess that's where I'm at with this. I would like to see us move forward. I think that that if we could add that language to the C1 district in the zoning ordinance, that would satisfy your current need, Al, and it would also protect the township residents in the future.
What would be the process for doing the text amendment to C1, and how long does it usually take? Maybe I might suggest we postpone this and take the pulse of the township board. But what is the process?
So for a township-initiated text amendment, the next step would be for the planning department to prepare the text amendment, to have it reviewed by Kevin Bennett. There would be a public hearing at the next available planning commission. It would be discussed. If found acceptable to the commission, it would be recommended to the Board of Trustees. As a text amendment to the zoning ordinance, only one reading is required under the state of Michigan. So essentially, it could be a two-step meeting, provided the changes are acceptable and depending on the amount of public comment, of course.
What would that do to your timing?
What is it, I'm sorry?
What would that do to your timing?
So I've had meetings with the supervisor, the build, Cherie. I didn't want to have to come and, rezone. They told me in 5 different ways where you can't do this unless you get rezoned. Go get rezoned and we're going to get this solved. I did not know that, there'd be any concern because I didn't know there'd be any more heavier commercial I can do with a CVS and a grocery store. I don't know. Maybe I'm not familiar. What else could we do? And if we did do something, it would have to be approved, correct? If somebody wanted to build a hotel there 100 years from now, it'd have to be approved, correct? So I don't know I don't know what else could there be more than a CVS and a grocery store that's heavier than what I am now. I'm sorry, I just don't understand.
I don't think anybody here is concerned about what you would do, but by making a change that goes on beyond where you're going to be, we could have some problems. Now, the comment was made that, well, this isn't a commercial district. It actually is, but it's an island and a very unique one. And I think we have an obligation to keep it as the intensity down as low as possible. And that would mean keeping it a C1. So the opportunity to allow you through a text amendment to change it and go ahead and get a liquor license would seem to me to be an ideal situation. It would also preclude somebody in the future from going to the higher elevations or heights in there. So, I would sure favor that. And it's a special use. Every other C1 that would want to do that would have to come in. We'd have to consider the specific situations, whether to approve the special use. It's not automatic, but it gets us away from the potential of somebody in the future tearing it down and using really an unacceptable use that might have come up in the C2. And you wind up getting what you want.
Laura, is it appropriate that we perhaps consider tabling it tonight? Perhaps you can have some discussion with Kevin Bennett about the potential of the text amendment, and then also review, does he have enough parking if there were a sit-down restaurant there? Because if there isn't, then that doesn't, even if we say, okay, we're going to rezone it, and then you don't have the parking requirements. So we need to find that out if he does have enough parking to even support that.
So there are rules to protect, if I want to say I want to do this, there's rules where I can't do it. So, and I won't do anything which nobody wants. I'm only, I'm not asking for anything. And I know if like you say, you're worried about, what ifs. You have the power to stop, you say, you can't have that because you don't have enough parking. That's, that's why you have that power.
Yeah, but it's a larger issue. We're trying to help you
I know,
as much as we
Thank
can,
you.
but there are larger issues, just beyond you. We have to think, a step ahead. I don't think anybody has any qualms
I know,
about
but,
you.
I mean, I've met with Laura many times, and they said, well, you have to, the special land use wasn't, I wouldn't be here if it was available.
Right. I understand.
Okay, so a clarification, Dennis. So with Al, your intention is not to take your old store
No,
and to put liquor in that store?
no.
Maybe a restaurant, but no liquor license in that location? You want to be able
I
to
want it
serve at your market?
If a cleaners and a hair salon came tomorrow, I would take that rent. That's all. I just want to, it's an eyesore right now, and I want to rent it.
I understand that, but if we said we would allow a spot, almost like a spot zoning for the market, I hate to use spot zoning, but, okay, it's not legal, okay. A text amendment, okay, where we approve it, and then all of a sudden we see the spot next door leased out to a restaurant with a liquor license that's open till 2 in the morning, that changes the landscape of the area, and that's what we're trying to prohibit. And I think you're okay with that. You don't necessarily have to have the ability to serve beer and wine or liquor in your old space.
What's the question?
You don't need the ability to serve beer and wine or liquor in your old space, the
No, I
space
don't know.
between CVS and the market.
No, I have no,
You just want the ability to serve at your market.
correct.
Okay, just clarification.
I like your solution.
So Laura, what do you think about?
I'm happy to broach the subject with the township attorney and explore the parking at the site.
Yeah, so we would just table it.
One way might be to define the liquor license issue in a C1, that it's only in a facility that is primarily a food service area, not just a bar.
Secondary.
Yeah, so it's got to be a secondary use. So it could never, in other areas, they couldn't tear down a building or toss out everyone there and turn it into a nightclub.
Often we see in zoning ordinances in municipalities that there will be specific use regulations. So for instance, restaurants or liquor, the use of alcohol and serving of alcohol as an accessory use to an existing restaurant or cafe establishment is a permitted land use, provided that the hours of operation are between noon and 9 p.m. We see that quite often, where there's additional protections that have to be met. If something is requested outside of those, then perhaps it becomes a special land use or a C2.
You've been quiet, John.
I couldn't help but notice in Howell, you've got a John's Bar and Grill 2 doors down from your John's Market.
Yes.
That's not what you're looking to do here, though, right?
No. I don't own either of those businesses.
Well, any other comments or?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to, help them solve that. Totally appreciate the fact that, nobody can predict the future, and if we open up that C2, somebody could come along and offer them $100 million and build a car dealer that ship there. I mean, it's
Or
possible.
parking garage.
Parking garage.
As
For
illogical as
autonomous
that might
cars,
seem.
which are coming. So that might be a good solution.
Well, at least we can explore how we can help Al accomplish his goal while still kind of protecting that area, that neighborhood, and keeping, it's a neighborhood commercial kind of thing.
July.
It is unique, though, that the C2 specifically permits drugstores, whereas it's not really mentioned in C1.
Well, that's because when he built the CVS, it was a C2.
So he's grandfathered under the
Yeah. That's how he got the CVS store.
That's my point. That was what I was trying to say. I'm already a grocery store and a CVS. What else worse can be, nothing.
So,
Okay.
are we ready?
I think we're throw it out there. and see where it
Mr.
goes.
Chairman, I move that we postpone PC number 2292-0518 for up to 90 days or our meeting in September. Support.
Who supported that? Okay. Moved by Commissioner Pratt and supported by Commissioner Harp to postpone until the September meeting of the Planning Commission up to 2292-0518 to explore other options.
Sure.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. We'll try to work
So
with
that's
you, Al.
good news, actually. Pardon? That's good news, actually.
Thank you.
Next up is application 2290-0518, the Hillside Residence. And Ms. Howe, your report.
Thank you. The application before you is for a planned unit development, a PUD overlay. As you'll recall, the PUD process starts with an initial concept review by the Planning Commission.
Hey, Leo, could you give us assist and close those doors if they want to talk out there? Thanks very much.
Thank you. This application is for a planned unit development, and the PUD process starts with consideration and public hearing by the Planning Commission. Then that concept is either recommended for approval or denial to the Board of Trustees. Once that concept, the PUD overlay, is secured, then the site plan process can develop and the associated legal documents. That then comes back to the Planning Commission for your review and then the ultimate approval of the Board of Trustees. So it's a four-step process, and this is the very infancy of that process, the PUD overlay concept. The property is just over 3.5 acres. It's the former or existing Courthouse Grill Restaurant, located just south of Plymouth Road, right there at the western limits of the township before you enter the city of Plymouth and Hines Park. The site is zoned the C2 General Commercial District, where PUDs are a permitted form of development. The proposal is for hillside residences. These are multifamily apartment dwellings, and takes the form of 2 buildings, both 4 stories in height, with parking underneath on the ground floor. The proposal is for 88 units, which is within the maximum density permitted, given the 3.5 acres. And 32 of those units are proposed for 1 bedroom and 56 for 2 bedroom. And 141 parking spaces are currently proposed on this. The PUD zoning article was recently amended, as the commission is very familiar with. There are now 8 criteria that must be met. It used to be 5. In order to find a proposed PUD as appropriate. In general, we do find that a residential development on this site can meet those standards. Specifically, this is a rather isolated site in terms of adjacent properties. It's across from other multifamily. To the south, we have Hines Park and the Rouge River tributary, which will likely not see redevelopment. There's also the cemetery and a municipal facility to the east. So it's not likely that intensive development on the site would have negative externalities on those adjacent properties. We do find that there, remain to be improvements to the streetscape as part of the PUD, and that perhaps there are some more opportunities to respect the historical nature of this site. It's been an important area in the township and the larger Plymouth community for many years. It's important to note that on the future land use map of the master plan, the site is also planned as commercial. This is exactly the same condition as the residential multifamily development to the north, the Ravines. That was developed under a PUD for a mix of condos and apartments, and that too is zoned commercial and planned as commercial on the future land use map. So there's no real uniqueness between that property and this one. Also, as part of this process, curb cuts will be removed from Plymouth Road. Even though the road is 35 miles per hour in that stretch, reducing curb cuts means elimination of potential traffic impacts, and we are supportive of that. I'd like to direct you to the fire department report, which is in front of you this evening. We received this report yesterday, and the report states that the concept plan with the two buildings as proposed cannot meet the township's fire code, and as presented cannot be approved by the fire department. I've spoken with the chief, and Chief Phillips recommends that the applicant meet with the fire inspector to resolve this issue. I think that all parties agree that there are solutions to this. It doesn't mean that the site is unbuildable or that we can't overcome this, but it does likely mean, from the fire department's perspective, that there will be some adjustments to the footprints of these buildings in order to meet the code and ensure that emergency access can be provided to all areas of the building. That's really the sticking point of what the fire department's review states. There needs to be enough room for the fire trucks to maneuver around the building and to get secondary access to the site. With that said, the next step really is to hold the public hearing, see if there's any comments from the community. The applicant is here this evening to kind of discuss the philosophy, I believe, behind this residential concept and the market that they're looking to attract, and their sort of overall development plans for the site. It's really up to the planning commission's pleasure if you're comfortable knowing that in the end, 2 4-story buildings are being proposed for this site, but the footprints of those buildings will likely be modified from what you see today. If you're ready for a motion this evening, or if this is something that you would like to see back after the fire department has that internal meeting.
Are
Thank
these
you.
condos or apartments?
Apartments.
Mr. Richmond, your report.
Thank you, Commissioners. We have reviewed the PUD option for the reference project for, in regards to the Plymouth Township engineering standards. And based on our observations and our review, it appears the subject project can be designed to meet the engineering requirements of Plymouth Township. there is water and sewer available for the site. So for our review, it can meet, we recommend approval for PUD option.
Any applicants here? Do you have a presentation or comments or? Knowing now that the buildings will have to be adjusted because of the fire department concerns.
My name is Alex Bogarts. I'm the architect for the petitioner. Just to give the board my background, I've had my own practice for over 40 years. And the entire time we've done multifamily, low-rise, mid-rise, condominiums, and have done several projects like this. To kind of jump ahead to the fire department, we'll certainly meet with them. I don't know that the fire department was aware that this would be a fully fire-suppressed building, but we will certainly adjust our site plan to meet all standards that they're going to have as criteria with they're the ones that really are sort of first in line to look at this and approve this, and then we move forward from that. So we understand that that's our first order of business. We're delighted to hear the engineering department feels that we have all the necessary utilities and so forth on board. We've spent a lot of time, Mr. Jonah and I have spent a great deal of time before we got to this study. We looked at several different building types and several ways to approach this, and it is a very complex grade site, if the board is aware of that. At the west end, it's very high. It's 11 feet higher at the west end than the east end. It's a very unusually shaped property. It has tremendous topography across it. But nevertheless, it's a great piece. It's a wonderful location. It's got a tremendous amount of frontage. Backing up to the park and having the river there behind us is just a wonderful amenity to this site. And we're very excited to be a part of it. We recognize we're here just before you see me, just conceptually, we know we have a lot of work to do. We think that this is the right fit. It's, in a sense, to some measure, it's a down zoning from commercial to residential. We are very positive about the potential unit types and the building elevations that will certainly work with the community again to keep this in the spirit of what the exterior elevation of the building community wants us to move forward with. And Mr. Jonah and I are here this evening to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. I just have a few comments. You know, I followed some of this on social media a few months ago. You know, this is a very historical site in Plymouth Township, and I think people are somewhat saddened to see the restaurant sort of disappear and this development go in. So I was pleased to see in the planner's report the recognition of this historical aspect of this particular property. So can you go into a little bit more detail what plans you might have to try to recognize what the historical aspect is and perhaps preserving some elements of the restaurant to have inside the buildings or on the site itself?
That's certainly something we'll look forward to doing and making that as part of our presentation. Just so the board knows, I'm also on the state's list of architects approved for historic structures. We've done several adaptive reuse of historic structures here in Michigan over the years, and we recognize the importance of this site as a site to the community. And we look forward to putting our plans together and coming forward with you with something that does respect that prior history of the property.
Okay.
But nothing of the original building would remain, right?
I'm not aware of it. I'll let Mr. Jonah answer. I'm not aware of any. Was there any relics or any of the property that was there retained?
If you could come up to the mic, because the meetings are recorded and it helps in putting the minutes together.
Apparently there are no elements remaining from the old building, but there certainly is historic photos that we can look at and come back to the board with and show, and you try to launch off of that as our design criteria.
I drove through that site, and I think the building has been added onto over a period of years. It's not clear to me what is fairly new and what may have been there originally, but I did notice that on the west elevation, there is some wrought iron there that has some nice scroll work that perhaps you can use as, some entrance feature, or, when you do that, something you may want to look at. Pictures of it originally, perhaps old menus or serving dishes that may still exist that can be on display, in the lobby of the
We've had,
building.
my practice has dealt with other projects very similar to what we're dealing with here. We've taken and had either an element, name the building after some historic portion of the property, find some existing elements that we can have as part of our identification of the property used in that. Something we try to carry the history of what the property had into the new development. And we look to search that out and come back to you with a proposal that will respect that.
Okay, good. Other questions?
Yeah, you referenced early on that you had several projects like this. Where would we be able to see any multi-unit buildings that you've constructed that might be somewhat similar to this?
Certainly, I can get the board either have you go to our website. We can get.
What's the website?
Yes, the website is primarily single family, but you have to, if you go into that, there's multifamily phases in that. I can bring or get advanced to the planning staff images of other buildings, properties we have that are up and occupied, that are multi-story buildings that have a wide variety of exterior designs, from very classic to very contemporary. We can give you buildings that are similar to scale to what this is, so you can get a sense of what that building is.
That's what I'm looking
Properties
for.
you can drive by that the board members can go and drive through and see. And we're very proud of the work that we do, and we look forward to advancing this to the community. We think we can bring something really a successful project here in many, many regards. And certainly, most importantly, to the people that are going to end up living here. It's a wonderful site. All those units that are backing up that open space are going to be pretty wonderful units to be looking out in the back of there. So it's going to be a treat.
Yeah, if you could send something to Laura that she could
I will
forward
do
to
that,
the Planning Commission, that would be great.
I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Other comments?
Does the applicant own the building?
I'm sorry?
I say, does the applicant own the building?
It's under contract.
And can you describe a bit about timelines and about what the units would consist of? Are they flats, or are they townhomes, or multi-levels?
I'm sorry, timelines and what?
The timeline for when you would want to start construction on it down the road?
Well, if you can approve this, we'll start next week. We'll be
And are they all?
we see it probably the spring start. Logically, there's a spring start for this project. We're going to have many months of processing through the community. Then we have our engineering to do the architecture, mechanical, electrical, structural, landscaping, get all that developed. That we'll do during the winter. Hopefully go in for our permits in the late winter, February or so. And then once the weather breaks, then try to get our site going. So we're probably solidly 9 months away from.
And are all the units flat as far as single-story flats?
You mean the unit itself?
No, the apartment building.
One-story apartment.
Yeah, they're all flats. They're central corridor, elevator access. It's a luxury property. We looked at many other building types we would do, the classic walk-up and so forth, but they chose to abandon that and go because we think we're in a very strong community, very strong location. We think this is the place really a super luxury development, which is what our plan is.
What would be the price points, just kind of ballpark?
That's a great question. I mean, in today's standards, most product is around $2 a square foot. We're going to have units from 1,000 to 1,200 square feet here with probably 2 parking spaces, covered spaces for most of the units. So we're going to be in the $2,000 to $2,400 a month once this is up and vertical, which is pretty much right in the marketplace today.
Now, did you say that the west edge of the property is a lot higher than the east edge of the property? It's exactly the opposite.
The east is much higher.
Yeah, the east
There's
is much
like
higher.
11 feet of
So,
differential.
so the exposure of that four-story building on the east end, it's going to be very tall.
No, it'll be only four stories, because that,
No,
Right.
what I'm saying is it's going to be a lot taller than the one on the east end. No, I know, it, but it'll look a lot taller just because of the elevation.
again, these are really preliminary numbers.
Yeah, I know.
I've targeted the first floor at 704 on what we call the Westerly Building 100 building, and I have the first floor at 713. So there is, there's several feet of difference, 10 plus feet of difference there.
It's a good 20 foot up. I mean, you're looking at because the lower section of the current building is where all their banquet rooms are and all that. And then you walk straight up to a restaurant that's at least 15 feet higher than the other side.
Right, there's a tremendous
Yeah, there's a
change right there. Yeah,
and
exactly.
the other thing I'm wondering about is, and I don't know this for sure, anybody know how many stories the courthouse is?
It's for,
The court, I'm talking about the courthouse.
correct.
That's because your building will be right next to the courthouse. That's the municipal building you're talking about, right?
Yes, correct. It's for when you're at grade looking south from Plymouth Road, and then the side street there at the cemetery, that steps down and it's a walkout. So there's 5 stories when you're on the cemetery.
Okay. So from that standpoint, you're in good shape because it's actually taller than your building at that end of the property.
Well, we'll be happy to come forward. We'll get some elevation.
Oh, I was just, I understand. I understand we got a long way to go on this.
Yes, we do.
Did you say it was underground parking as well?
Yes, there's parking below the first floor. And by the way, a large percentage of that is actually below visible grade. For example, at the east end of the property, our grade elevations here are 712 and the first floor is 713. So it isn't over till this corner that you actually access the lower level where the grade drops down. So you won't notice, on that elevation, you won't have any visual access to that parking. It'll be all buried underground.
Well, the back of the cemetery is a hill.
That's
Just
right, yeah.
straight drop off at the back of the cemetery.
Any other questions before we open up for public hearing? Okay, you can have a seat, and we'll open the public hearing at 8:29. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak to this application? Yes, ma'am, you can step.
Good evening. I don't know if you can hear me with this. I come to you tonight not only as a resident of Plymouth Township, but as the chairperson of the Plymouth Preservation Network. I don't know if you're familiar with our charity organization, but we advocate for the preservation of Plymouth's historic buildings. As it was mentioned earlier, it was all over Facebook that people are very upset at the thought of losing this Plymouth institution. The oldest part of the building was built in 1889. It's been a restaurant since 1934. Over the years, there have been many, I've gone to many wedding receptions, my own included, and different, community activities at the site. So we are very dismayed at the possibility of losing this historic building. As it was also mentioned, over the decades, this building has expanded many times. Some of the additions are not really historically that important, but the original structure, if you look at old photographs, was a farmhouse, like I said, built in 1889. It has pretty much been engulfed in the current structure. It's very difficult to see it. We would like to ask that if it is at all possible, to try to retain some portion of the original building, if it's at all possible. And our members have also expressed that because this is a PUD, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's supposed to be some type of public benefit to a PUD, they would like to see, if at all possible, some type of bike path that would lead down into Heinz for easier access for people to get down to the park. And that's all I have to say tonight. Thank you very much.
What's your name, Wendy?
Oh, Wendy Harless, sorry. I live at 11677 Morgan Avenue in the township. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else that wishes to speak to this? Okay, we will close the public hearing at 8:31. Well, here again, you see, an advocate for trying to do something, recognizing that historical aspect of it. So I think you've got a good idea what we would be looking for. As far as the bike path, you could explore that. I'm not sure what that means with Wayne County, where exactly that bike path would be, but you can look into it and see if there's a way to tie it in.
Did you ever, in your discussions, consider trying to incorporate some of the existing structure, the historical pieces of it, or never had a discussion?
Hi, good evening, Lath Jonah. So originally, when we took a look at this building, we tried to go through there. We wanted to keep the whole structure and just add on to it. As stated, there was a lot of different portions that have been added on, and going through the building, it's just not feasible for utilizing it as any kind of opening, because even if you were to try to open one whole floor up, it's just with so many different rooms, it was really hard architecturally. Two, by doing any changes, the county is going to go, when we spoke to the county, they were talking about our setback, that we have to go off the road. So that left us, along with that, they were saying both curb cuts were not feasible. So they weren't going to allow us to make any changes to the building unless we started working with them on closing down one of the accesses, working with them on giving them the access, what am I trying to think of here, the road that, when the land that we had to give up to them, right away. Thank you, Leo. We had to give them that access right away. So that totally squashed our whole thoughts about trying to utilize the building. We want to try to utilize some of it, some of the features. I'm sure we're going to get, Alex is going to get, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but we'll get her phone number and we'll try to figure out what type of features we could include into the building and utilize it, so that way it makes the neighborhood happier that we're coming into town for.
Okay. And then you can check with the owner to see if there's any artifacts, like I said earlier, the dinnerware or old menus and the photographs, and you can check with the Plymouth Historical Museum as well. And see
just a little bit of research that we have to get into that we haven't done. Our renderings aren't even complete; they were just conceptual. And
right.
So, as stated earlier, this is the beginning of the whole show.
Process.
So, exactly.
Okay.
CRS Commercial, 10741 Fellows Hill Drive, Plymouth Township, on behalf of Jonah Properties LLC. Yeah, I did have an opportunity to go through a fair amount of old photos that was given to Sam Messina, who is currently the owner. These photos date back to, I think I recalled, circa 1880. So by all means, with Sam's, I'm sure some of it's probably a bit sentimental to him because he has owned it for many years, and he's started part of this legacy of this facility and what it's been to the community. We can look through those and make make whatever give back to the historical society, so they can be something that can go on and people can be able to look back on those as as a remembrance of what this facility was to this area. We obviously named it Hillside for a reason. because it was Hillside Restaurant for 50 years. We hope that that will have some significance with, with the community. And we also want to, this has been part of the community for many years. And that's the essence of why we're doing this project, is to create another development here that will be an amenity to the community. We recognize that there's the township's done a great job building out subdivisions for the last 25, 30 years, but now all of our children are getting to be that 20-something, 25-something age. This year alone, we had 1,500 students graduate from the park. If I just estimate that a third of those were 500 students that came from Plymouth that are 18-year-olds now. They're all going to go on to school. They're going to go to their 4-year colleges, 6-year colleges. And what we hope that they do is when they come back, rather than look at other communities throughout Detroit metropolitan area, they'll look at Plymouth Township as a very viable option for them to live here. I know us as parents would appreciate that my child's not running off to another community, because I'd like them to make Plymouth Township their community in the future. The best way to do that is to start them here in a residence. We also recognize Burroughs and Durr, as you know, are very large facilities that are going through a transformation right now. And there's a new age of employees that are coming to these facilities. And it's a younger generation. And the younger generation wants to live close to where they're working. Therefore, I think as a potential selling point for these companies that are coming in, they're going to be looking at housing, much as you see what's going on in Detroit now. They look at where the people are going to work, where are they going to live, where are they going to play, and they all want that to be all part of sort of a very close proximity. We hope that Hillside can be that to the future employees of Durr, can be that to the future employees of the redevelopment of Burroughs, which will also be potentially create a catalyst of more companies to come to those facilities, and that will be in part employed the younger generation that we know today.
So Leo, in terms of amenity, is there any talk of a pool or tennis courts or a workout facility or anything within that apartment community? No, not enough room. Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Commissioners, if I may, when I met with the applicant prior to this meeting, the recommendation was that this is a site that's on the smaller scale, but it is located almost adjacent, even though access is limited, to Hines Park. And, one of the major draws of this is downtown Plymouth and the walkability, the bikeability of that. The recommendation in the review is that instead of an on-site amenity that would probably maybe fall a little short compared to what else is right next door, that payment in lieu of that amenity would be made to the township so that that could be put towards, previously we had discussed, maybe a joint project with the state and with Wayne County and the city of Plymouth for a secondary access onto Hines Drive, even though that isn't directly from this property, that payment in lieu could go to support a benefit that would really impact, not just Plymouth Township, but the Plymouth community in a significant way.
Okay, other comments? One thing I think that the commission needs to consider, since the fire department has some issues with the layout, and this is still a very conceptual stage of the process, if you're in favor of recommending the PUD to the Board of Trustees, would you feel comfortable doing it at this point without seeing the final first draft of the site plan?
Well, it's obvious that if they don't conform to what the fire department does, it isn't going to go anywhere. So, I mean,
yeah,
why would that?
My feeling would be that my encouragement would be that we could recommend approval of the PUD at this point with the condition that obviously the developer has to bring the property into compliance with the township fire department's requests. I don't think that should be an issue. And the other side of that is that, I'm sure that's, as Keith says, it's going to be obvious, an obvious requirement anyway. And it just moves the whole process forward. And I see no reason not to do that.
Yeah, I think the recommendation would entail recognition that they have these issues. I mean, it's not like we're requiring that they comply with it. That's taken for granted. We should advise them, yes, there are issues that we're confident they can get around and meet.
So you wouldn't be changing the actual design of it as you've submitted it. You're just going to have to somehow change the configuration of the buildings on this parcel to meet the fire department's
Your comment was center of the target. This is conceptual. We just put this together to get in front of the board. All the projects we do, all the multifamily projects we do, first order business for us is to meet the fire department. They have criteria for turnaround, truck service distance to building, is the building fully fire suppressed or not. We understand clearly what has to be done. We will take it there. As I said earlier this evening, that's our first order of business, to meet the fire department. I'm confident we can get that solved with them. We do that on every multifamily project we do, and we do projects all over the country. So I don't see it as an impediment to us. Whatever we're going to do, we will adjust our building designs and plans to conform to fire marshal's criteria.
But you'll have to have that done before you appear before the Board of Trustees.
We will do that before we come back to you with our first preliminary site plan review. That will be concluded before we come back before you the next time.
But the chairman is telling you that before this can be brought before the Board of Trustees, you'll have to have that issue resolved.
We can do that.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Are we ready for a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend to the Board of Trustees approval of 2290-0518 based on the application being in compliance with the 8 stipulations for PUD in our zoning ordinance. The township's engineering report, and the stipulation that, of course, before the item becomes before the township trustees, the issues as stated in the township fire department report be resolved.
Is there
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Pratt and supported by Commissioner Harp to recommend approval of the PUD for application 2290-0518 to the Board of Trustees. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Well, congratulations, good luck. We'll see you again. Okay. Okay, with that, we have no old business, no other planning commission business. So with that, turn the floor over to Laura to give us some updates.
Thank you. I'd just like to mention a couple things. First, the Park and Rec plan was finalized. There's a copy here at the township, and they're going to be putting it on the website as well if you'd like to take a look at the finished adopted version. In terms of master plans, the city of Plymouth is updating theirs, and it's just been released, the draft plan for public comment. The Planning Commission has recommended that, and it's out for comment and distribution. So I just got a link last week for the plan, and I'll forward that along. There's a number of sub-area plans that were developed as part of this master plan update, and I think it might be interesting for us to take a look and make sure that everything's compatible and kosher, especially with the adjacency of the township. And we can plan on discussing that then in greater detail in July at that meeting. There was an ARC sign that was submitted for the urgent care facility that's at Sheldon and Ann Arbor Road. So we'll be seeing that on the July meeting, and also the meeting that was removed from the agenda tonight, the use variance. That discussion will be taking place at the July meeting.
Where's the urgent care facility?
It's in the I think it's Essex.
So where the CVS.
Correct.
Little
Yep, in
Caesars
the
are?
Speedway.
Oh.
Mhm. It's in that that plaza, because medical uses are permitted in the ARC district by right. Had a lot of calls on that, a lot of calls, and the application for the final site plan for the Beck Road Hotel. Both Dave Richmond and I have discussed it and met on it and reviewed it, and neither one of us are comfortable to recommend final approval. And the applicant has followed the process and submitted and paid the township fees for the special meeting. They have requested this meeting and made the application for next week, for the 26th. Tomorrow, our review letters are going to go out, and it's our recommendation to the applicant that they rescind their application at this point, because I don't think that it would be in their interest for us to meet next week and to just rehash some of these issues that Dave Richmond and I have stated before. I don't feel like that would be very productive at this point. So as soon as I hear the okay tomorrow from the applicant that we will not go ahead with the meeting, we will let you know via email if we are having that meeting or not. I mean, they have a right.
This is the Wednesday next week meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. They have a right to request that meeting. But if the answer isn't no recommendation, then the meeting is a bit fruitless. Yeah.
Boy, I would think so.
We all want to see Leo again, right?
Yeah. And Ned.
I just had a question on the car repair application that was pulled out. Why
Sure.
was that pulled out?
So the attorney that's representing the applicant, his mom had a stroke today, and he was not able to make the meeting. So
Dennis sent an email this afternoon.
Yeah, I got.
I forward on what you had sent on.
So he's kindly requested that we reschedule that to the next available, since there's no notice requirements. Kevin Bennett said that he could be here for July, so we'll make sure that's a priority for the July meeting.
And was there any resolution on whether they were in default of the 6-month thing, or is that still arguable?
I believe that's really a question for the township's code enforcement. I would caution the planning commission that that's something that is kind of outside of our realm. We're really tasked with deciding, is that use appropriate in that area? And is it something that's aligned with the future land use map of our master plan? Is it something that we want to see continue there? Because whether or not that time lapsed is kind of getting into the weeds, and something that we don't really have jurisdiction over as far as the planning commission is concerned. Kevin Bennett might be able to shed more light on that, but as far as the code enforcement,
But
the planning
if it
department.
hadn't lapsed, why would they have to come in again? Just because they're changing the operator in there? I mean,
Change of tenancy,
yeah.
potentially.
I thought the reason they were coming in is because they were told that it had lapsed, so they had to renew.
It's my understanding that they have a consent judgment on the property that was valid until that use ceased to exist on the site. So right now, it's not a legal non-conforming use. It's an illegal non-conforming use.
Still doesn't look like it's in use either.
So, I mean, but if the issue is that it lapsed, then they would be asking for a new limitation on, or a new okay to have it non-conforming. I don't understand why they, unless it lapsed, why they would even have to come back.
Well, that's the argument. They say it didn't lapse, and our ordinance, our officer says it did, right?
So, I mean, that's where I'm saying, if it lapsed, then why wouldn't that issue be settled first?
Oh, right. Well, I don't know. That could require, does that require a judicial process to determine whether it lapsed or not?
It probably will. The applicant's, I believe, recourse in the situation is to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. The zoning ordinance states that after making application with the Zoning Board of Appeals, that the application must be made with the Planning Commission for your recommendations back to the Zoning Board of Appeals on the issue of this use in this area, if it's appropriate today and if it will be appropriate in the future.
Yeah, based on, that's my understanding of it, is that that's why they're here before us. It has nothing to do with whether the use was lapsed or not. It has everything to do with if they want to get a variance, the first step in that getting the variance process is coming to us to get our recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals as to whether we feel, based on because we're the arbiters of the zoning ordinance, does the Planning Commission feel that use is appropriate at that site? And if we say, yes, it's okay, then they have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals to get it done.
But if we declared that it lapsed, that, due process would require that they have their day in court.
We're not declaring it lapsed.
Right.
This is my understanding. The only thing that this thing is coming before us for is, does the Planning Commission, the current Planning Commission, feel as though that use is appropriate at that site?
And what triggered that? Because it's the same use as it had before, right?
New owner, right?
A
new owner?
I believe he's
renter,
renting it out.
I think the owner is the same. He just found a new.
Same owner, different tenant.
So it's because of a new tenant that they have to get the use approved again?
Oh, now you're above my pay grade.
That's where,
Well,
that's why I'm
Sounds to me like
confused.
they're trying to cover other bases.
That sounds like a
The two
legal
options
issue.
that they had, they were trying to see whichever option would work for them. Either fight the lapse in use or try to go the avenue of the ZBA is how I read it.
That may very well be their plan, but I would just really strongly caution the commission that we should not get down in the weeds with why they're here. Just, is that use appropriate?
That's all. That's the only thing we can consider.
So it was
We
triggered
don't
by a
care.
change in tenant.
I'm not sure.
It doesn't, Keith, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They potentially, want to go to the zoning board of appeals to get that, to get
Variance.
a variance on that property. That's, whether or not that other thing lapsed, that's a legal matter from my perspective. But the process to get a variance on that property is for them to come to the planning commission first and have the planning commission decide whether that use is.
So they never
So,
had.
so what they're saying in the memo is that they have two pathways they can take. They can go to circuit court and get a ruling declared on whether it in fact lapsed, or they can go the other route, which is to come to the zoning board of appeals, come to planning commission and ZBA, and say, can we get this variance, right? And if they do that, then they don't have to go to court.
Correct.
But
So
they
they've
have
never
both
had a
options.
variance for what they're doing?
No, they had a
Yeah.
court order.
Basically,
Oh,
we
okay.
basically, okay, in that circumstance, they would, okay, it doesn't matter. It's moot whether it lapsed or not because we've given them the variance.
Okay, now I understand.
Yeah. So they're going to preserve their right to go to court. If they don't get the variance, they can still go to court and say, no, it never lapsed to begin with.
Because their interpretation is that it
Okay,
didn't lapse.
now I
Exactly.
I just didn't understand what triggered them coming.
Because he can't rent the place out.
I think that one of the lawyer says, I don't really want to go back to circuit court. I don't know this.
Right.
But, so let me try this avenue first to see if I can get a variance, then I don't have to.
Could be the path of least resistance.
Exactly.
That's basically where they're at. So back to the hotel in Ned. Do we know if he's made any inroads, him and Leo, with Home Depot in terms of the ingress and egress?
No, that's still one of the outstanding items. The township and the fire department, we provided a letter stating what was approved as part of his PUD option on the site for the access as secondary means. And to our knowledge, the applicant has provided that to Home Depot. And they're still working on it, but we haven't seen any documentation to be reviewed by the township attorney at all. So that's a big outstanding item, and the parcels have not been combined as well. The application was made 2 months ago, but still missing documentation that was never followed up on. So
Shocking.
our hands are a little tied with it.
Thank you.
Anything else from you, Laura?
There's going to be a facade renovation for one of the buildings in the industrial park on Helm. It's going to be quite nice. I can send some images of that. It hasn't been approved. It's just administrative. There's no change to the footprint. It's just the exterior facade. But I think it's encouraging that we're seeing even minor updates in our industrial park to those kind of things. So it's a positive. That's it. Thank you.
Anything else from the commission?
Just a quick mention that Zoning Board of Appeals at its last meeting denied the sign applications for Fox Hills, those huge signs that are on the Lilly side of his building have to come down. And so I don't know where he's going to take that, but just for the commission's knowledge, I know you all get the minutes, but I don't know if you all read them all. But those two variance requests were denied.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, is there a motion?
I move we adjourn.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Pratt and supported by Commissioner Barberina to adjourn the meeting at 9 p.m. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries adjourned.